As John Cleese used to say on the old Monty Python show. And now for something completely different. Ken Mencl joining us, Sergeant Mencl from the Twin Falls County Sheriff's Office. Bill Cowley as well on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. 49 at 823. It is hot, though, in some parts of the Magic Valley, a little too hot.
I'd say, yes.
Sergeant Mencl was just giving me some details on what's going on with the fire situation in the South Hills. And that fire is now spread across county lines, as I understand it. It's now spread from Cache into Twin Falls County, too.
It's still in Cadgett County, but it might have overnight. I haven't been back up there since about 10 o'clock last night, but it's my understanding that there's some hot spots that have pushed perhaps over Rock Creek Road. And if that's the case, then yeah, we're probably seeing some hot spots in Twin Falls County.
You're trying to get people out of the South Hills.
We are. Yesterday, we spent a concerted effort with several of our deputies up in the mountains, taking these trails where we know hunters and campers to be, and we ran across 30 or more people out there in the area, especially down by Bear Gulch. And there's some really unhappy hunters right now, not wanting to leave the area because they've drawn that once-in-a-lifetime elk tag. We've seen a lot of animal movement up there, but that fire is just spreading so quickly.
I was going to say, when a lot of these people, I'm sure they're aware that the fire is burning nearby.
There, you can see it.
Right.
In fact, last night as we were buckling up all of our ATVs and whatnot, and putting them in the trailer to be stowed for the night, it was well after dark. It was around 10 o'clock, and with the lights on the vehicles on, it looked like it was snowing. It was a lot of ash coming down, and if you woke up this morning, you probably aren't surprised to see the ash accumulation on your vehicle.
Driving down Washington Street today, coming to work, at first, your eyes think you're seeing fog, and you realize
Right.
the dew point isn't there. So,
Right.
But it was one of those mornings where I haven't seen this in a while, but where it was hanging right in close to ground.
Yep. Yeah, and you get up there into the hills, and all of a sudden that smoke really clears out in areas, but then it just gets so socked in. What we want to let people know that yesterday there was a Badger Fire update, and I wanted to just briefly go through that because the new update hasn't come out yet. We're waiting for the U.S. Forest Service to do so. But currently, there are no evacuations for the Rock Creek area. There's a fire weather watch in effect over the fire area today, with very dry conditions, high temperatures, and high winds. As we look today, Thursday, there's a wind event with expected winds reaching critical thresholds of over 25 miles per hour. Along with dry conditions and an unstable atmosphere, the fire growth is expected to go over Rock Creek Road today and possibly consume the cabins there at Deadline Ridge and the Balsam Cabins later this afternoon if it continues to rage like it is. Everything south of the 541 road is closed, which runs to Deadline Ridge. 542 is also closed, which runs east to Horse Creek, and Diamond Field Jacks is closed as well. So if you're going to go up there in a motor vehicle, I don't know why you would unless you are one of the cabin owners that's trying to remove some stuff. Realize that if you're going up in the South Hills and you somehow make it through an area that's closed and your life becomes imperiled, you're going to cause firefighters to have to deviate from their main job of trying to extinguish this thing and try to save your life. And that doesn't help anything. So realize that the firefighters up there with the primary task of trying to put this out, we don't need people going up there causing them to have to stop putting out the fire. And resources are limited. It's my understanding that we're going from stage 3 to stage 2, which is not on the scale of getting better, it's getting worse.
And a lot of the big firefighting teams are out on the West Coast, so
They are. So
we have a limited supply.
Such a very limited supply. In fact, the staging area, the command center, which was at Diamond Field Jacks, because the fire is getting so close, had to be restaged at the Cadgett County Fairgrounds now. And so when you pull the command center out of the immediate area because the fire is pending that close, you realize that this thing isn't stopping anytime soon. It's zero containment, and they don't expect to have containment for quite some time. What I would say is that the purpose of the order is to protect the public and firefighters during wildfire activity and their suppression activities, and that includes all trails and most campgrounds and hunting units. Harrington and Third Fork campgrounds are still open. Access to the Harrington Fork trails and Third Fork trails are still closed, though. And we've put this out on our Facebook page. There's a link to the U.S. Forest Service Facebook page, as well as their Twitter, as well as the specific website that is doing consistent updates with the progress of this Badger fire.
And there was a moment, well, over a span of between two different announcements of the size, where it grew by about 7,000 acres at one point.
Yeah, and I would say that 7,000 overnight probably is a conservative effort to where that's possibly at today. I don't know this for sure. I'm going to put out that I heard from another government entity, not the U.S. Forest Service, that it's perhaps at 35,000 acres now. I don't have anything to confirm that though. The last county that I saw was 28.5, but that was yesterday afternoon at about 4 o'clock, and this thing continues to burn on.
And you mentioned the cabin, so there's some property endangered, but there's a certain point too where you start getting into some housing once you get out of
Hmm.
the forest area, the national forest area, and you get into some housing. Some of that's the most expensive housing in southern Idaho.
There's some nice housing in that area, yes. There were several fire units called up, a request of 20 fire units to go up to protect some of those housing areas, especially the cabins at Deadline and Balsam Cabins. Twin Falls Fire Department trucks were seen up there, Rock Creek Fire, Filer Fire, Castleford Fire. Just throughout the whole valley, you could see fire trucks staged up there at um, Diamond-filled jacks. And I know that there was a lot of activity over the night clearing brush and limbs from the ski lodge at Magic Mountain, as well as a lot of overnight activity on behalf of these fire departments clearing brush and flammable fuels around the cabins in both of those areas that we've discussed this morning. So there's a hope that if the fire does come this way, which um, it looks like it's going to, that they're doing everything they can to protect those homes up there.
We've got more coming up with Twin Falls County Sheriff's Office and Sergeant Ken Mencl. It is 8:30. It is 49. Bill Colley with you too on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Sergeant Ken Mencl with us from the Twin Falls County Sheriff's Office. It's 8:33. We're at 51. Bill Colley too on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. But of course, the South Hills are burning. And it could well be that this fire becomes much larger with the winds coming in and a cold front moving through the area in the next 24 to 48 hours. I got to ask you quickly about the livestock situation because, I've been up there many times and I've seen some of the cattle grazing, right alongside the road.
Right.
That's when they're free range. It's not easy to track them all down.
No, and there's a lot of cattle up there in the Fawn Springs area that we observed yesterday. And then there's a lot of sheep over on moving towards the top of Pine Mountain and trying to get those sheep out of there as well. I didn't see really any active efforts of moving the cattle at this point, but the Cattlemen's Association has been contacted, and hopefully they'll be able to get the word out and just kind of pay attention to what the fire's doing and take the steps necessary to save the livestock out there as well.
Because it's not easy to round them all up.
No,
Obviously.
not,
Yeah.
not when they're spread out like they
Yeah,
are. No,
yeah.
that's a monumental task.
I mean, I remember one time driving to Jarbidge, and I just happened at this one corner. There, I happened to see one solitary animal, and I didn't see any other around. But you realize there's hundreds just scattered.
Right.
Same thing here in the South Hills.
Yeah, just so many cattle out there. As we were hitting the trail yesterday, trying to warn people of the impending danger, just every trail we took, there were cattle alongside the trails.
And we've got a telephone caller looking to reach us, and I do want to give the number out 208 736 0300. Also, if you've got the app on your smartphone, you can send us a comment or question that way too as well. Caller, you're up next. You're on KLIX.
I would like to suggest that people have a portable radio with good batteries, and also to make sure that they have gas in their vehicle, maybe with some water, and be sure to have your medications ready in case you have to go quickly. You can gather up everything and be safe.
That's a great, great input there on what you might need when it comes to evacuating. And actually, the U.S. Forest Service has what they call the 6 Ps of evacuation, and that's on their website. You can also go to www.readyforwildfire.org. The 6 Ps of evacuation outline make a plan to get out of there, prescriptions, gather all the necessary prescriptions and have those ready to go. Have your pets gathered, pet food and pet supplies. Collect all your important papers like your insurance cards, medical cards, and tax information. Gather your important pictures and have your important plastics, i.e., your credit cards and have those in some sort of a go bag and be ready to evacuate at a moment's notice, so that some of those important heirlooms like the pictures and whatnot aren't left behind in the wildfire.
We've got people obviously who may be coming into the area, and they may see smoke in the air, but they assume it's all blowing in from the coast, and they may be trying to get up into that area. Are they
Right.
being turned back?
They are. We have the Forest Service is set up um, on um, Rock Creek Road, Magic Mountain Road, and just real quick, one of my law enforcement contacts with the Forest Service said presently there have been 35,736 acres burned up there in the South Hills. So it's increased to 35,736. Um, but what we're seeing in our valley right now is mostly the South Hills fire smoke. Um, and we have, we'll later be putting road closure signs down in Shoshone Basin, which is a road that's commonly used to access the area going into Bear Gulch and up onto Deadline Ridge. We'll also have some road closure signs on Rock Creek Road. They are moving the command center from Diamond Field Jacks over to it's been moved already to the Cassia County Fairgrounds, just because of the danger of how quickly that fire is moving. So you will be turned away today as the fire continues to loom closer.
There really no, obviously, it's difficult to predict which way it goes at this stage of the game because the winds are going to be blowing in, and when they whistle around a mountain, uh, sooner or later it's got to burn itself out, though. You would imagine.
Well, at this juncture, once it goes through the Forest Service land, if we don't get it contained at that point, then it becomes a real issue with BLM land, and it'll continue to burn out in the BLM land with all the sagebrush and cheatgrass. And we've actually got BLM rangers up there with us as well, helping to notify people and do our very best just to keep people that are in the area safe and informed, so that people understand just exactly what this fire is doing. And it's pretty hard to predict, like you said, because while we're standing up on top of the mountain yesterday, the fire is moving so many different directions. The wind will change from the east out of the west, out of the west, and then blowing from the south. It's just the fire is not just really moving one direction. It's kind of just expanding out in a huge circle. But you do see from aerial photographs, you can see it just consistently now. There's a huge fire line that just keeps moving to the west.
And that grows. That circumference grows.
It is, yeah.
We've got about 20 seconds before the break. Well, we'll get to this after the break. We'll talk a little bit about some of the wildlife in the area. It's coming up on 8:40. We're at 49. Joining us, Sergeant Ken Mencl from the Twin Falls County Sheriff's Office. Bill Colley with you, too, on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Sergeant Ken Mencl with us from the Twin Falls County Sheriff's Office on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. We're at 50. It's 8:43, and if you'd like to reach us, 208-736-0300, 208-736-0300. Also, you can download the app for your smartphone, the News Radio 1310 KLIX app. Actually, it might not be a bad thing to have in the current conditions, because you'd be getting bulletins on weather and especially breaking news, anything that happens with this fire, as Benito is looking closely at it and tracking everything that's going on with it. So you'd be able to get updates. And I don't know, I've never had any issues with my smartphone on up there. I mean, I know in some parts of the state I have, but mine generally works when I'm up in the South Hills. So there's, I don't know that I've ever tried to make too many calls, but you're not too far out of the from those cell towers.
Most of the area of the South Hills, you're not going to get out on. It's only when you're on top of some of those ridges, like on top of Deadline Ridge and whatnot, that you get service. The only frustrating thing I have with the app is that the delay is there, so that you might hit an important topic that I want to talk about, and I'll type a message in, and you've moved on to another topic.
2 minutes later,
point, right?
Yeah.
But no, I mean, that's a lot of times when I'm not even in the area on vacation, I'm able to do the radio program from my phone, because I've got the ability to listen in on that app and kind of have a feel for the direction your show's going. So yeah, it's a great thing when you're not in the area and you can't touch that 1310 repeater.
The previous caller, I think he brought up some of the things you could have. A weather radio is not a bad idea either.
No, not a bad idea. And in fact, when you're listening to 1310, I can pick up 1310 anywhere in the South Hills with just great, phenomenal reception.
Yeah. We've got a caller, another caller looking to join us. And again, that number 208-736-0300, 0300. And caller, you're on the air with Sergeant Ken Mencl.
Hi, I just read your the deal on the fire up south, and according to what I read yesterday on the fire near us and the Idaho fire deal, anybody caught on those roads up there is fined $5,000. Is that correct?
I don't know what the Forest Service fine amount is, but it's pretty healthy, and there's a possibility that if people remain in an area that's about ready to go, that there's could be more than just a fine imposed. So,
Right.
really, in looking at what's going on up there, especially as we've got the U.S. Forest Service, the BLM, and the Sheriff's Office working up there in capacities to try and save life. When it's time to go, when we ask you to go, it really is a good idea to just
And
get
that's
what you get and take off.
going to be closed until the 1st of November.
Uh, I don't know what the closure looks like. They're talking about the last report that I saw is that they're looking at possibly not even having this fire contained until after October.
Right. Yeah, that's what I figured. I just wondered about the people that drew tags up there to hunt. They won't be able to hunt anything on east of Deadline Ridge, basically.
Yeah, if that fire keeps going that way, you're absolutely correct. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I just need a little clarification on that. I appreciate it.
Yeah, you bet.
Thank you much for the call. Again, that number 208-736-0300.
Well, that kind of leads us into what we were talking about right before we went on break, is what the animals are doing up there.
Right.
And we saw several head of moose and several head of deer actually leaving the area rather quickly, headed west. I didn't see any elk yesterday, although I heard that there were some elk in the area by a hunter that was trying to fill his tag. But if that fire continues to move the way it is and growing by the number of acres that we see overnight, from 28,500 some odd yesterday to 35,007, it's only going to be a couple of days before it's in that Fawn Springs area. So we really recommend that people stay up to date with the U.S. Forest Service information that we've put out there, and know before you go. Don't put yourself in a situation where you're unable to get out by yourself, and now you're relying on first responders to help you out.
When Terry Thompson was here the last hour, he referenced that we have not had what you call lightning strikes in a long time. So a lot of these things, the concern is they're being started by people, and not on purpose necessarily, but by bad habits.
Right. Well, and I was listening to one of our Forest Service law enforcement officers the other day who was describing a story of an individual who had actually left a campfire unattended and had taken off down the mountain. And there were several other issues that had happened, and that ended up in that individual being cited for various issues that are very costly. You got to realize that there's a lot of these things that, even though the sheriff's office is working under contract by BLM and by the Forest Service to do patrols in those various areas, whether it's on BLM ground or Forest Service ground, to help them police that area, if you will, to keep things in check, that it's really difficult to man all that all the time and make sure that people are being good stewards of our resources. And it's still not uncommon to see people leave campfires unattended and break camp and leave their camp and still have smoldering embers in that campfire. We just, right now, there's a burn effect in place. Also, through the Department of Environmental Quality, the burning restrictions cover all of Twin Falls County, and the air quality right now is unhealthy. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah, I didn't need anyone to tell me that part. That
Right.
I could breathe it in and out. That's pretty obvious. Talking a little bit about the crisis situation like this that comes up. Obviously, there are a number of agencies that can respond on federal, state, and local levels, county and local levels. But sooner or later, when you referenced that there were firefighters from Castleford up there, but it's pretty dry on Castleford too, and if they get a call, I mean,
Right.
they have to pack up and go. So we're going to get stretched really, really thin as this goes on.
Well, and somebody made the comment on our Facebook page, why don't we just, the U.S. has all of these abundant numbers of equipment to fight fires and these personnel. Why don't we just flood these fires with all of this equipment and personnel all at once and extinguish the fire and then move on to the next? But there's so many fires, even just in the state of Idaho, going right now that we didn't anticipate, let alone what we're seeing in California and in Oregon. The resources just simply aren't there. and they're stretched really thin in this Badger fire, and that's why it continues to burn the way it is we're doing everything we possibly can with the resources available, and it's just not enough, and we'll continue to see it spread.
I got to think that in my lifetime, this is the worst fire season I can recall.
Well, and our weather conditions are such that it is the prime time for these fires to rip and take hold. The dew point, the humidity level out there, as I watched one of the Forest Service rangers grab a tree and just kind of run his hand down the tree line and take a handful of leaves into his hand and just crumple them up. I mean, they just crumpled like paper. So it's no wonder that we're seeing the fire the way it is, and then you top that with the 25-mile-an-hour wind gusts we expect today, and it's just going to continue to burn.
While the caller was chatting with us a couple of minutes ago, I noticed on my TV monitor the pictures out of Oregon where the young woman saw a fellow on her property and went out and confronted him. What are you doing on my property? And he had a box of matches.
Man.
And he says, well, he said, I'm just passing through. And she said, why the matches? And he said, I smoke. She said, where are your cigarettes? And he didn't have any. So she took out her pistol, said, get down on the ground, face down. He did. And then she took her free hand, called deputies, and they came out, cuffed him, and took him away. When I said earlier that most of these are not intentionally set, but they are man-made fires.
Right.
But we have that worry too, is that you have some people out there and they either have a political motive in some cases, or they've got a mental illness, or they've got something like that that's going on. And I'm always worried about that. And plus they see this fire and they go, oh, and it's almost like it triggers something in them.
Right. And I don't know what caused this Badger fire, and if I did, I still wouldn't be at liberty to discuss that because it's a U.S. Forest Service deal. But I'm sure that they're investigating the cause, and we'll probably find out whether this was natural causes or man-made. But yeah, I was reading an article where the Portland Police Bureau located an individual that had caused a fire through arson and incarcerated him for that. And shortly after making bond and getting out, they observed him lighting more fires. And yeah, I don't know what it is that causes a person to think that igniting a fire like that is okay to do, but it certainly is costly to the rest of us.
You referenced Cassia County. The woman who actually runs the Chamber of Commerce out there, Penny Main, says thanks to you and the team, everybody out there for the work they're doing, and praying for everybody.
Appreciate that, Penny.
Yeah.
The real thanks go to the firefighters that are out there putting their lives in danger battling this fire. I got to watch firsthand some of the things these guys were doing yesterday and the areas that they were putting themselves into, an area that we were, as law enforcement, asked not to go into. They stayed up there overnight, not battling the fire, but keeping a close eye on what the fire was doing. Obviously, there's some serious dangers that are associated if you try and fight a fire at night with falling timber that you can't see very well.
A couple of weeks ago, I'll tell you what I admire about the firefighters. There's almost a swashbuckler type of. A couple of weeks ago. I stopped over by the overlook at the end of Washington Street at the canyon, and there were two trucks that were parked alongside Washington Street, and there must have been about 8 firefighters, and they all stopped to get their lunch.
Right.
And they were all eating their lunch at the overlook, and they all looked to be young people. Well, if you're doing that kind of work, 75 is probably not.
Right.
But they all looked to be just so relaxed. And I was thinking it's probably because it's one of the few times, yet they were sitting there eating, and the canyon was just filled with smoke.
Mm-hmm.
But they were sitting there eating their lunch, and they all looked at, it was like, it was their downtime, and you could tell they really appreciated it.
Every sandwich for a firefighter must have that smoky flavor to it, right? We tease each other a lot. It's not uncommon to see a firefighter kick back eating a donut saying, hey, I'm a cop for a day, right? And like, oh, come on, brother, that's slow. And then we'll come back and we'll lay in a recliner. Hey, I'm being a firefighter for the day, right? There's a good-natured relationship that goes back and forth. We really appreciate the work that the fire department does. It's a very dangerous job, especially right now with where they're staged at and trying to protect those homes and help residents evacuate from there.
We're not seeing a lot of, and that's the thing, you mentioned most of the equipment going out to the coast, because we're not seeing a lot of the green trucks that I normally see. We're seeing other firefighters who are here taking care of all of this.
Right. There's a lot of red trucks up there right now, which isn't real common. I mean, there's some green trucks up there we observed yesterday, and they're bringing in some additional bulldozers to fight that. And then, of course, we've seen the jets taken off out of the airport and some of the crop duster-like looking planes that are going up and flying. And It's just really it is the apparatus that we have available to us and the fact that it's so scarce right now, and we're making do with the best we can with what we have.
Before you go today, and I know you're headed back out there, but you referenced what's going on in places like Portland. I got to think that some of the tragedies of at least the last week, though, have started to maybe make people appreciate first responders a bit more than they did, let's say, 3 months ago.
Yes and no. I guess that's dependent on your environmental factors and where you find yourself at in the United States. Listening to the show earlier this week, I believe it was on Tuesday when you had Keith on the air. I'll echo Keith's sentiments in the fact that working as a law enforcement officer in the Magic Valley is a wonderful thing. The support that we get from the majority of the people is just overwhelming. It's not to say that we don't have a couple of people that feel the same way. Even last night, as we were talking to hunters about needing to get out of the area because of the pending closures that were coming that way, there were some real hostilities there. Hostilities to the point that could have ended up in an arrest, and some very unkind and unpleasant things that were directed towards law enforcement. And so we're not immune from that altogether, but by and large we are. After that contact, the deputies that were dealing with that individual found themselves eating hamburgers in another campground. People just overly excited to see us there, looking after everybody, trying to take care of them. And shortly after that, they were eating a hamburger and drinking a Coke. So it's from one end of the spectrum to the other, but mostly it's that nice spectrum where people are very supportive of what we do, and we certainly appreciate that, and it makes our job so much easier.
We got about 90 seconds. Caller, you got to make it quick. Go ahead. You're on the air with Sergeant Ken Mencl.
How about clearing the brush away from your home and your property, and also wetting down your buildings?
Yep, and that's what's being done right now with the fire department up there, clearing the brush away from these cabins and just being prepared once that fire is anticipated to jump the road.
2 years ago in California, they discovered where some houses in the neighborhood did not get destroyed, and that is because they did not have a lot of vegetation around the houses.
Well, you see a lot of those areas where they've built a gravel berm around the house, and then they've built the grass, and they've done another gravel berm where they've created that fire barrier, if you will. And if you don't have one of those, I guess that might be something to consider in the future. If unfortunately, as we anticipate, a lot of people are going to lose some cabins once that rebuilding effort takes place. Definitely something to keep in mind.
Yeah, I think that at least on the one level, the fact that major housing developments are pretty much far away from all of this.
Well, but yeah, we look at like Detroit Lake over there in the Oregon area, and the whole community was burned up. And
Yeah.
these were houses that had been insulated. And the way these embers can just carry in the wind and then land back down, while a barrier's great, it's not foolproof.
I was going to say, and on the Cache County side, you start getting over there around the other side of the mountain too. If it were to burn that far, you do have some smaller communities that
You do,
be
yeah,
endangered.
yeah, absolutely. Um, Albion and all those little communities over there certainly, are watching what this fire's doing and what it could potentially do if the winds continue to shift and move around.
One of those places I'd like to retire someday.
Right.
Nice and quiet.
You and me both. You and me both.
We want to thank Sergeant Ken Mencl from the Twin Falls County Sheriff's Office. Good luck out there today.
Thank you.
And we've got Pastor's Roundtable coming up in a moment. It is 52 at 8:59 on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com.